Welcome, welcome. You are listening to Building the Black Educator Pipeline podcast, the place where we talk to real people in the real struggle, doing the real work. And I am your host, Shayna Terrell, educator activist dedicated to the lifelong struggle of freedom and liberation for my people. Today, I am super, super excited to invite our guest, Mr. Ernest Crim III. He is a former award-winning high school educator of 12 years, a history teacher. He is a public teacher, and I want y'all to catch that. Not a public speaker, y'all. He is a public teacher and content creator. He's also the CEO of his own Crim's Consulting LLC, and also an author. Just want to shout out some of his accolades. This brother has been on CNN, The Washington Post, ABC, CBS, NBC, a number of outlets preaching and teaching. So we are excited to have him here as a guest today. Welcome, Mr. Crim.
Hey, what's up, Shayna? Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, it's a pleasure to have you. And I know you probably most people like, oh, why you don't call him Ernest? Like, you are a teacher, so I'm used to the Mr. Crim, so I'm gonna be calling you Mr. Crim throughout the whole our whole conversation.
That's exactly why my social media handles are remain consistent with that.
A teacher, like, ooh, Mr. Crim. That's what I'm gonna call him. Not calling his brother Ernest, Mr. Crim. But thank you for joining us today. So we always start out with asking our guests to just tell us a little bit about yourself, your work, past and present. Like, who is Ernest Crim III? Like, what should we know about you?
Yeah, I am I would say a lifelong student and educator. And I think to be an effective educator, you have to be a student, actually more than you are an educator. Mm-hmm. I'm someone who always wonders about how things work. Specifically as it relates to our community. And I'm always trying to find solutions, always trying to uncover stories. I'm always trying to uncover ways for us to effectively build moving forward. So just like you said, I'm a public teacher in a sense that I believe that this information shouldn't be restricted to people who can get that teaching degree or restricted to people who are going through the K through 12 system. Our education, how we come from historically, is not just something that existed within the four walls. We were teaching on the street. We teaching under trees.
Yes.
We teaching the kids wherever they are, any place. And I'm just a product of a nurturing environment, of a nurturing family from Melody and Ernest, from a long legacy of people who, of course, were built great civilizations in Africa, were forced here, survived the Jim Crow South, and decided to come to the Chicago area to find a better life. And here I am now trying to pay it back.
I love that. I love that, especially the student part. Listen, gotta be a student if you want to be a teacher. Talk to us about how you actually became an educator. Like, what interests you in education? As you know, Black men are a rarity in education, right? I think it was up to 2%. I think we down to like 1.85% Black male educators. So talk to us about how you got into education.
Yeah, it was an accident. I definitely did not plan to become a teacher. I can't recall one of my boys growing up saying they wanted to grow up and be a teacher. It just wasn't a thing. Like, that's not something you talk about. You always, for one, it's going to be athlete. It might be like rapper, it might be an actor, something where you known, and really it's about making a bunch of money. So that just wasn't in my view. My mom was an educator, but even still, that wasn't something I saw myself doing. I saw the work she was doing. I was involved in it. She would take me to meetings and things like that. And I would see her, take her students with us to church and, do a fundraiser to take them to Washington, D.C. when they were in 8th grade. And I would see all these different things. But in my mind, it was just about, helping people. Yeah. So, but what happened was my first year in college, I almost flunked out. I was majoring in psychology, and it kind of speaks to the importance of us having a why or having a purpose for the work we do, because I was just taking the classes. I just chose it. I didn't really care that much about it, So after that first semester, of course, my grades reflected it, and I almost, flunked out on academic probation. I decided that I wanted to then take a Black history course because I began to realize that I was immersed in our culture my entire upbringing. Even though I never had a chance to sit down and take a course, we had Black history posters all throughout my house. We had this series that Budweiser actually created called The Great Kings and Queens of Africa. And that series started in the 80s. And we had these posters all throughout our house, coming from the bottom, the stairs all the way up, and they were just stapled on the wall. So I would walk past our greatness every day. And my mom had, some of the same. If you're watching this telecast visually, you can kind of see some of the stuff I have on my bookshelf are the same things my mom had in our house. African art. She had, books about Malcolm X and Dr. King and things like that. So I was all up in it. So when I had the opportunity to take the course, it was like, well, let me take this in a structured environment. Let me learn about our history from a professor who studied it. And I absolutely immediately fell in love with the course. It began to me like I had so many questions growing up about my upbringing, why my neighborhood looked a certain way. And I was somebody who was bused to a white neighborhood for 8 years for school, for elementary. So I saw the differences. I saw how we were treated versus them. I saw the police, monitoring our neighborhood every day, versus the police were friendly to my friends on this side of town. I saw the options. You can have junk food, you can have healthy food versus all we got is junk food. There's no other option. I saw the fact that they could go to their park district and walking distance and they could play pee-wee football and they could do this programming. Whereas where we playing tackle on the concrete because ain't no programs for us. So like when I took that course, it was like, oh, that's why. Because when you grow up in this system without a comprehensive like worldview of who you are, you begin to internalize it and you think, oh, it's my fault. We must not be working hard enough. That's where a lot of this pull yourself up rhetoric comes from. We must not be working hard enough. No, we work harder than anybody. It's the system ain't for us. So that was the spark right there. That was my freshman year, second semester, 2006. And I have not looked back. I have studied this. I've decided to major in history so I could go into class and teach. I minored in art history, which was really the major though, because I took every course I could in ours that would cross-reference as the mainstream U.S. history course and all of that. So that's 18 years ago. That to me is the thing we need to uncover and unlock our potential. And I decided to teach so I could reach our kids before they went into the so-called real world and not be aware of what we were engaged in, involved with.
Absolutely. But where did that come from, right? So I love, right? You got into it, exposed to history, but to say I'm gonna go back and I'm going to teach children, like what hooked that?
There's a part of us that I think like as you get older, especially when you hit these milestones like 16, 18, 21, society tells us that we have to act our age, right? You're 16, I got my license now, a little more responsible. I can't go to the rated R movies, but I can still drive there. You know what I'm saying? It's like 18, you get a little bit more than it's 21. It's like, oh, now it's like I'm supposed to magically feel like an adult. Yes. And as I got older, I remember thinking like, I don't feel like I'm more, of course, a little more mature, but I still like cartoons and stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like I still want to sit around, play video games. I want to play basketball all day. Like, and there's a part of us that sometimes is crushed as we get older and we matriculate to the so-called real world. And I always wanted to keep that side of me alive that just love having fun and connecting. And like I had like when I was like 15, I had my first cousins on my mom's side when I was 15, right? First cousins. And like seeing them, I'm 15 years older, I'm a role model to them. And then a few years later, have another cousin. So it's like, I understood that if I did not have my parents intercede when I was younger in that time frame, then I wouldn't have made the right decisions. I saw what it looked like to make the wrong decisions in my neighborhood. And I know that it could sometimes be apparent at home, but for a lot of our kids, the parents are busy. We're in a capitalist society. We're working a lot. I could, from my perspective, be that parent at school to help provide what their parents might not be able to help them with. And I think subconsciously, having a mom who taught for 30 some years and was a principal in the community and did so much outside the class, that was being downloaded in me too. I didn't realize it at the time, but it was like, I want to mentor. I want to help get kids to this point. And how can I do it? I got to be in the school because like where else are kids forced to go? You know what I'm saying? Every day by law. Like I could start a program, but I need to be in the school first to even see what it's like. So I chose history then too, because to me, that's the best way to mentor our kids.
Well, that was my other interconnection. Like I tell people all the time, one of the most important jobs in this world is being a teacher because you control the minds of the future.
Right.
Like that is the connection there. So I'm like, history, right? Why
Right.
history though?
Yeah.
Like, what's so important, and why is it so important for young people to get grounded in history, their
all
history?
all it takes is, for one, history is the only course, maybe English too. I give them a close second, but that's the only course where we could talk about everything in the world and then not be viewed as you overstepping your boundaries, being political or whatever. We can help nurture the way kids think about the world. We're honestly controlling the lens we have, right? You think about how we're typically brought up in this society. We all know these common myths. Columbus discovered America. He sailed the ocean blue 1492, right? We know these common myths. The George Washington story, I think he was a cherry tree guy, I don't remember, but like Benjamin Franklin discovered electricity, something that's been here, right? Like all of these common myths, right? We don't, our history doesn't start until we are forced here, right? Abraham Lincoln saved the day after Harriet Tubman ran away. You know what I'm saying? I wasn't trying to spit, but that's just what happened.
It was coming though. It was flowing though. I was with it. Yes.
You know, and then Frederick Douglass gave some nice speeches, but ultimately it was Abraham Lincoln that freed us all, right? And then 100 years later, Dr. King said da 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 da, and Malcolm X was the bad guy though, right? So like I think what happens is when I step into that college classroom, the first time I heard a counter narrative was there outside of my household, of course. But you look at it's your parents, you be kind of like, when they always gonna say that. When you hear it again somewhere else, you're like, oh, they might be for real. Yes. So when the whole course is about me, my people, and I'm learning that I've been lied to my whole life, I'm like, yo, I can't let y'all be lied to too, because at my core, I'm a servant. I'm a helper. When I go back to how I was as a child, I was always a person that did not join in when my friends was bullying people. I was a person that would befriend people who were being made fun of. I was a person who stood up, had a tenacious spirit to fight. So I think that's what we do is we have to find that childhood version of ourselves and transfer it to what adulthood looks like. And I know for us, we're fighting a rising tide. And I used to think that I didn't have a role because I thought so many people were already doing enough, until I realized that that's not true. Like when I speak to a child, I can sometimes only need 5 minutes to open up their mind to something they've never been exposed to before. I do a mentoring program at my former school, and I was there last week. I walked in a little bit early before they started, and the facilitator who was there previously was asking everybody to name their favorite Black historical figures. And one by one, everybody was going around. Of course, there, Dr. King, Rosa Parks, Dr. King, Harriet Tubman. You had a few that were saying some outliers, but it was the same typical story. So I got up before I was going to present. I had just 5 minutes with them before they left, before the next group came in. I said, why do you think that those are the same 4 or 5 people that we all say, no matter where you went to school?
Yes.
And then I started giving them this expansive approach of like our history, hundreds of thousands of years of culture and art. But we only talk about not even the last 500, sometimes it's the last 4, 3, 2, 50 years. Yep. That's when we begin our view. So I said, how does that shape how you view about yourself? Why do we focus on this small percentage when we are the ones who were here first, who created these civilizations? So like, I just want to expand the Black imagination. History to me is the word, but like having kids now, I understand that every time I give a new fact, I'm feeding your imagination. That's why I'm very conscious of the information I share. When I first started, I remember chasing views, and it's like, man, every time I do say something positive, I might get this many views. But if I talk about the lynching of this without any type of substance to it, it goes viral. And I had to be careful of that, because it's like, but what am I, if I'm just feeding that to you without any lesson, or if that's the only thing I'm feeding, how am I shaping how you imagine yourself? The imagination, the imagination. So it's like, I got to give you information that's going to help you remember who you were before you came into this realm, which is going to help you strategize who we need to be moving forward, even when you're not here. So.
And that's interesting, because social media can be a tricky place, a very tricky place for clickbait, likes, and all that other stuff. We know that a lot of times social media fuels emotion, right? And when you're targeting young people, right? People are purposely going after young people, targeting their minds, targeting their self-esteem, targeting their worldview, shaping how they think. How are you able to I mean, you've been able to navigate that and be very successful. You have like 4 million followers?
Well, my content reaches that many, but I have TikTok is 400,000 followers. IG is 200,000, but the content reaches about that many
About
across
4
all
million
platforms.
because
Yeah,
folks are sharing and
yeah, right.
doing all
People who
that
don't
other
follow you
stuff.
are tuning in and stuff like that. Yep. Yep.
So how do you think you're able to navigate, like, because I mean it's all positive and it's all
Yeah.
truth.
Yeah.
And again, most people, the kind of stuff they posting for likes and shares and to go viral, right? Especially to young people. But it seems like young people are really attracted to your content and consuming it.
Yeah, it's hard, honestly. Well, let me backtrack. It's hard for me to figure out how, honestly,
Okay.
because that's not what because I got the people got to understand. So I started creating content in 2016. I dealt with a hate crime, which was recorded, and that was my first piece of content to get justice. After that, I started creating content. I started talking about what Kaepernick was doing. I was talking about Freddie Gray. It was a way for me to just be able to express myself without the restraints of having to worry about censorship or not having enough time in the class and all of that. So that's 2016. I didn't create my first TikTok until 2021. I didn't have a huge following. I probably had a few thousand on Instagram. I probably have 4,000 on Facebook. That's where I primarily posted things. So I didn't think that things would catch on like that, but I knew that the people who would watch my videos of a few hundred consistently, they liked it. They saw something in it. So that means to me that there are other people that can connect. So when I created my first TikTok and it got 10,000, I was like, yo, I'm on to something. So instead of me making these long 5-minute videos, I could make one and get my point across, because as an educator, you have to be able to like take complex methods and systems of thought and then be able to communicate it to a 3-year-old if necessary. So I just decided I'm gonna talk on these TikToks how I talk in class, how I talk to my friends, right? When I like, you know how it is. Like I was one of like 3 black male teachers. So you do a little code switching in the halls and the meetings and stuff like that. You're just trying to get to your safe place, which was the classroom with the kids. When I would shut that door, it was all about the kids. And I would talk to them how they spoke, but then I would translate it to like, this is how, I would say, Ida B. Wells, man, she was a G, but then I would also talk about like, what does that mean if you were writing it down for an essay or something like that? So that's kind of how we're connected. And I think what I've been told is, again, just the ability to reduce it and break it down hits people a lot. And we also have to understand that attention spans, right? So I try to switch scenes often as if I can. If I'm doing a green screen, I might say a sentence, switch it up here, keep people guessing. And also with this, you got to understand the element of it has to be one extreme or the other. Something that's extremely shocking, positive, or extremely shocking, negative. But I'm a teacher at heart. So a lot of my stuff still is going to fall in that middle that you need to understand. And it's about that persistence. Again, creating content since 2016, my stuff didn't pop off until 2021, 2022, and so on and so forth.
I love that. So as you know, this is Black History Month, right? This is our month to celebrate us, our month to celebrate who we are and all things. So because this is a platform for educators, I love to ask people in the classroom, how do you go about connecting youth to Black history and help them understand the importance of our history?
So when I was a teacher, it was, I always wanted our kids to know that it's a year-long thing, first and foremost. So what that meant for me was when I was teaching I taught U.S. history every single year of my teaching career. That's the only subject I taught every year. I didn't get a chance to teach African studies until my last 3 because it was an elective. You have to get kids to sign up, right? But what I did when I taught U.S. history is, for one, I started in Africa. I started in America, or Turtle Island before it was, renamed. I started with Europe and Asia. And I talked about what these civilizations were like before, the so-called Columbian exchange and the genocide and everything. My idea was every period in time in history that I talk about in U.S. history, I got to find out what Black people were doing, or I got to teach them, right? Because
Yes.
again, we were here way before the depigmentation and all that type of stuff. So
Absolutely.
why wouldn't we be around in 1776? And then I taught at a school that was majority Hispanic, then Black. So the questions would arise of what were we doing? So that made me even more versatile, because now I'm saying, well, what were you doing? Because up until that point, my mind is, oh, you're Hispanic, you're Mexican. Oh no, you have a lot of indigenous ancestry. So we talk about the Aztecs, the Mayans. You're truly understanding like what we all learned this history primarily from a European perspective.
From a European perspective,
right.
Absolutely.
So we talking Black history from August all the way through May. Black History Month was really, my kids, that's just the assembly, y'all. That's when we just gonna show the rest of the school what we've been talking about.
Yes.
So that's pretty much what that is. Yeah.
I love that. And I appreciate the fact, I always wonder, right, when folks are U.S. history teachers, how are you teaching the history? Are you teaching it from the European perspective? Especially if you in a school full of Black kids, right? Like, Are you teaching it from a European perspective? Are you helping Black children understand what was happening at that time, that they were more than slaves, right? Are you actually telling them the truth about white people and the barbaric nature in this country? I always wonder that. So appreciate the fact that you like, oh, I taught U.S. history.
Yeah.
But I told the truth. You know?
And it takes an effort. I'll be completely honest, because when I first started teaching it, you get thrown into a district, you're like, you don't get a summer training. You go to a couple orientations and then you come back to the meetings with everybody else, and they throw you the content and you like, well, where do I start? So my first couple years looking at the content that I was given, some of the stuff I was teaching wasn't 100% from the angle it should have been. You learn over time that, wait, why are we manifest destiny? But it's some of the stuff like they want it. Here's what they say, right? They say, teach it from a neutral perspective. It's impossible.
But why? I think that's crazy. Like, why would I? And why should I have to? You want to ask me as a Black man to teach history from a neutral perspective? I think that's so wild.
Because what's neutral after the genocide happened? Okay, Nothing. Well, look, we don't want to have to choose a side. There was the indigenous. Like, how do I teach slavery from a new? Like, I knew I was in the wrong space when I would hear in meetings administrators talking about recommended prompts for debates, right? So we would have like debates in class sometimes, and the recommended prompt would be, for example, you might be able to say, what was the cause of the Civil War? Was it this, or was it states' rights? Was it like, where am I in the Twilight Zone right now? We're not debating that. Like, it is
not a debate. It is what it is.
So we over here debating between like right wing and left wing talking points. I mean, and so you like educators who even go into, and not just history. I think I have the most explicit way to dissect this. But English educators, if I didn't teach history, it would have been that. Why are y'all still only teaching about these old white dudes as if they're the only purveyors of, like, we the ones who made English? Like, we flipped English and made it a code. Like it's still a crazy, stupid language, but we made it slightly fashionable. Like, y'all done had English all these years. We jump in and made a whole genre of music.
Yep, a whole genre of music, got our own vernacular. Like,
I'm saying, a whole different language.
Yeah.
Right? So why isn't it? Why isn't it Shakespeare and Tupac, or Shakespeare and Phyllis Wheatley? You know what I'm saying? Like Shakespeare and Jupiter Hammond, and why is it just Langston Hughes in February? Because to me, I mean, Tupac colder than Shakespeare to me, but you know what I'm saying? Like, Shakespeare got some cold stuff too. I mess with him, but he ain't the god of this. Just like
I love this. I love this. I love this. I love this. And all my educators watching, like, just challenging that mindset of people. Why do you? Stick to the curriculum? Why is Shakespeare God in the classroom? Because somebody told you that this is what you should be teaching?
That's what it starts with, because science, all of that. Like, why am I teaching this way?
But I wonder if people question that, right? I wonder if people question it. And that just opens up a ton of can of worms when you say it like that, right? Like, why am I teaching it this way? You go back to teacher training, right? So it goes all the way back to how you were trained in whatever college you came from or whatever alternative program you came from. How are they coaching you to teach curriculum? Then it comes into decision making, right? What decision making power do you have over the curriculum in your school? What influence do you have? And how much are you pushing to fight to teach something different?
Right.
And I remember when I first got into schools, right? And they were talking to me, you know how they talk about the structure of the curriculum, right? Like in sixth grade, they're gonna learn this, this, and this. Seventh grade, they're gonna learn this, this, and this. And I remember asking one time to the curriculum person, the white man, like, well, are they not gonna learn about Egypt and African civilization? Like, I just think it's weird that we just in the all black neighborhood and that's just
Exactly.
not what they're gonna learn. And he was like, "Oh, well, generally, just across this is the standard for like
The
what they learn."
standard for
I just feel like,
reproducing whiteness. The standard.
yes,
We in the
yes,
hood. I went to a black high school. We in the hood, and we started world history with the people who look like my teacher. We started with Greece and Rome. Like, and the only time we talk about Egypt is King Tut. That's the only time. So, like, we even have to be careful. Just because our kids are going to a predominantly black school does not mean that they're being immersed in black culture.
Sure. Yes.
You know?
And what I'm finding now, which is odd because my son goes to a private school, because there's such a push for inclusion, at times they have more black centered curriculum because they want to make sure that the black people in their school feel inclusive. So they have some more black centered curriculum and electives than the regular local public school up the street does, which is, again, just wild to me. Wild to me.
We got to redo the whole thing. I'm one of those people, when all the conversation was on the police in 2020, as an educator at the time, I understood the importance of that, but I wanted people to understand that these are just branches from the same tree. Like, you'll see policing, you'll see school, you'll see healthcare. And as somebody that was in those trenches, like, teachers get away with killing dreams day in and day out around this country. But because it won't be a headline, it won't be, a viral video unless there's some like actual violence in the class, we don't look at it that way. Like, the whole system is violent. The way that they are teaching it, and they got our kids thinking that like they're slow, like they're remedial. That they got them thinking that because we talk a certain way, that we have an attitude, or that is something wrong with us because we can't sit still. Who's going to learn by sitting? You can't learn sitting still. It's so basic. Like, kids, you can't learn how to walk by reading a book.
Nope.
You know what I'm saying?
And you speaking the truth on that. And again, like, I used to work in a system where kids were policed, right? And I was a part of that system. And it's sick sometimes, right? Because you think, and it's a lot of things are so interconnected, right? So if you're brought up in a house where discipline is a thing, and we know that, right? In Black culture, right? Discipline. And a lot of times, we connect that even to slavery. But how we discipline kids, how you're supposed to be, how kids supposed to be seen and not heard, how you're supposed to respect authority, how you're supposed to respect your parents, right? So you get into the school and you're taught these notions, right? So the thing that happens is like, oh, get to school. Like, these kids need to be quiet. They need to sit down. They need to listen. You know better than that. You're supposed to respect adults. What you don't see, again, especially if you're growing up in an all Black society, is what has changed is the color of those adults, the intentions of those adults, the thought process of those adults, and what they think of you in a larger worldview. So, I mean, my goal is not to teach you to be out here disrespecting white people. Like, that's not the goal. But my goal is to have you challenge and think, why do I have to be police? Why do you really want me to be quiet right now? And how reflective are you on yourself or this lesson that you gave me to try to figure out why we keep talking? Why do we keep interrupting? Why is it just, I don't want to learn? No, maybe you can't teach. How about that? Right? So a number of those things are interconnected.
We have to really too, like, I don't think our educators truly understand. Like, you would get the question oftentimes as a teacher, what do I need this for? I think math teachers probably get that more than anybody though. But it's like, why do I need to know? Like, or kids be like, oh, this is boring. School is boring. When I got towards the end of my career, I truly understood what kids meant when they said that though. Like, and it's not the fact that some things need to be boring. Some things are tedious, but at that age of 15, 16, 17, they were trying to communicate a higher order critique that they probably did not fully understand. And I think what they were saying is like, this ain't going to help me when I leave though. But if it is, can you like tell me explicitly? And mine was a little bit more concrete because I would always make present day connections. I would show them the connection between, we talk about the Bill of Rights. I would connect that to restrictions we have now or the freedoms we do have. I would connect like what happened 9/11 to the Fourth Amendment and how that's reduced. I would connect, anti-literacy laws and the book bans and things we see going on now. But in some content, it's not as explicit. Some of the content needs to be revitalized completely, but also too, our kids need to see and know, because in the population I had, oftentimes they'd be first generation here. They would have businesses, sometimes family-owned businesses. So they like, I already know what I'm gonna be doing. So like,
I'm going right into the family business.
I'm going right into that business. Like, can you like let me know what this is for? Otherwise, I'm probably gonna drop out. And the thing is too, like a lot of our kids at that age, when I was teaching high school, 14 to 18, some do know what they want to do and some don't. But the issue with our education system is it's a one size fits all approach. Mm-hmm. We gonna say, the kid who likes to speak and read and write like me is going to do good in school because I can sit down and do that stuff. But the kid who can build a computer but isn't being taught in that manner or build a home ain't going to know it till he graduates, takes a couple jobs he hates, and then at 25, 30, he figures out he wants to be a construction worker.
Yes, and had this old rough behind relationship with the institution that he went to for 13 years. And that's a shame. There's shame in that. And I'm sitting here listening to you talk, and I'm going back to when I was like in high school, and there's certain classes or certain things that I was just like, why are we doing? Like, what am I doing this for? The crazy part though is like, I wish somebody would have put it in a different perspective. So as I'm thinking about square footage, right? You learn all that. I was horrible, right? It just wasn't a good math student. But now here I am as a grown adult, like, damn, I should have paid attention because then I would have understood like this, how much I'm paying for each square footage of a house that I'm buying, right? Like, connect those dots. And I'm just even thinking about somebody talking to me about buying a house, right? That didn't help until like way in my adulthood, right? So aspirations of me even thinking a young girl from the projects, like, that I could attain and have a house. I used to think that you could only own a home, right? Because I'm from New York, I'm from the Bronx. But I used to think, oh, you can only own a home if you move down south. Because all my family down south, they had houses. But I'm, up north, I'm like, we just live in apartments. Unless you're rich and white, I guess that's who buys houses up north. But if you want a house, you got to go down south and get one. Right. All of that. But I'm just thinking about the connections that could have been made for me in school to help me understand money, living. I mean, all of that.
And who's going to teach us that? Like, if our parents are limited, then we have to be able to in some ways get that from school. And one of the tragedies I also think in education is, I love history, right? Mm-hmm. But was I really that equipped to teach it at 22? I don't know. I'm just being real, because I've been out the class a year and a half now. If I went back full time, I would be miles ahead of where I was, because I've had lived experience outside of a teacher. Mm-hmm. I taught economics 1 year, and I didn't, not to say you have to own a business, but it helps if you've at least tried. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm teaching economics like as I'm still learning these things. And so I would be like reading straight from the book, like, all right, so supply, the demand curve is when it's going, wait, hold on. Okay, wait, I said it wrong.
So you're opening up a can of worms of something like that. This is a whole nother episode that I'm going to have to bring you back down to going. And the reason why I say that, about teachers being masters in their content and how important that is, and who actually gets the short end of the stick for that. Right. And it's generally our young Black people who are in urban neighborhoods who get the short end of the stick, where they're getting very young teachers who've been in programs that they've only been trained for 2 years to a year and a half. Some of these jokers only been trained for 4 to 8 months, and they're out in the classroom, and our children are thinking that they're experts, right?
Exactly.
But they're not. They haven't mastered the content. They don't know. And again, that's when you like, whose fault is it, right? That this is happening. There's a large teacher shortage happening, right now. Schools of education are nowhere near where they used to be. And accountability is not on them, right? So this if you go back in the archives of this podcast, we go over this several episodes where we talk about all of this. But what you're speaking about, not being equipped at 22, happens all across America. That our young people are not equipped to. They haven't been trained properly. They just haven't. And then you ask yourself, who's to blame for that, and then who gets the short end of the stick when it comes to that.
And you would think,
you make
like,
a great point.
Even for history, the best teacher of that would probably be an elder or someone who has, in our immediate community that has experienced many things. And then the young teacher would come with the ideas of maybe the facilitation of it, the activities, But again, like at that age, I mean, the best English teacher might be someone who wrote a book, or who has reviewed books or has written things or plays, or like, but we equate skill with a degree. These Western notions, Western concepts, we would assume that somebody who has an MBA at 25 is more equipped to run a business than somebody who's worked there for 30 years with a high school diploma. And I don't believe that's true.
It's not true. You make another excellent point, but that's a good point about worldview, about experience, and what lens that we're looking at the world under. If we were looking at the world under African lens, and an ancestral lens, we would know that the best person who has the most knowledge is the elder.
Right.
But then the elders will have the respect of the young people and know that they're the people who can galvanize, be leaders, and have people out front. They just need training and they need support. So that intergenerational space, that's an African worldview. That's definitely not a European worldview at all. But let's talk about some Black history. Again, this is just the time of the month where I think people find out stuff that they've never known. Or like, I didn't know that was true. I didn't know this was happening. What? Because you don't learn this in school. People aren't teaching it to us, and it's just not heavily talked about. You already named on the two hands the people that people always generally talk about when you talk about something Black, right? Like the same couple names come up. But I would love for you to talk about just some Black history facts that we should know and we don't. Like your top 5. Like, I want people to be like,
top 5. That's hard.
Because I know it's top thousands, right?
I know.
Thousands,
But that's a good. I might have to make that a video. I might think about that.
Yes.
I think so. I always have to start with the foundation of where we're from, and I think that's important, just to kind of show our kids just the totality of it all. And I would say one of those facts would be, and it's something I learned recently, just in terms of like an exact time frame, would be that there's evidence that we've been creating art since at least like 150,000 years ago in Northern Africa, Morocco. And I want people to really understand 150,000 years ago, again, like I said earlier, compared to the last 500 years. If we added 500 years to 150,000, you have 150,500. Right? That's like, wow, right? And then we don't begin to talk about ancient Kemet. We're talking like maybe 4,000, 3,000 BC. So think about so if we subtracted that would still be like 145,000 or 147,000 years ago from that point. So there's so much that we still haven't uncovered about how we are here and what we created. Second fact I would share, I'm gonna group some of these together, but just the origin of, medicine and how we had natural remedies in ancient Kemet through Imhotep, who was looked at as a polymath, and he was an architect, physician, a philosopher. He wasn't a pharaoh, but he was revered. That's what, to me, might be my number one, just because of how our kids view themselves as mathematicians nowadays. They always, I can't stand math. I'm not good at math. That's like when we say, high blood pressure running my family. Like, is it?
It's not. It's dietary. It's dietary. Right. But
right. Is it, or is it that you live in a food desert? You know what I'm saying? Where the groceries or the supermarkets have been taken away and replaced with fast food places, right?
Yes.
So like we built those. They trying to say aliens did it. They got all they sending people to Mars, and they still can't conceptualize how this was done. So that's genius level. And again, remember those folks migrated from Northeast Africa to West Africa, Southern Africa, and things of that nature. So I think that's number two. That's very important to understand. I would say three, another important fact is, I would say 1526. That's when the Spanish attempted to enslave us in what's now South Carolina and Georgia. And when we were forced there, we immediately fought back. I think that's an important starting point versus the 1619, which is only a starting point because that's when the English colonies attempted to enslave us. But those Africans, some would say about 100 of them, as soon as they were forced there, they conspired and with the indigenous tribes. They burnt down the homes of these Spanish colonists and they ran away to live with the indigenous people there. I think that's an important starting point because it shows us that we've always resisted and we never accepted our fate. And most oftentimes you would see that we resisted the most when we would be in situations where we had that view of what Africa was like. Because if you take me and force me to a foreign land, and it don't, like, if I ain't got Wi-Fi, you know what I'm saying? It's like, hold on, this ain't right with my Wi-Fi. If I ain't got a Whole Foods or if I ain't got a gym up the street, what you mean? So you fight because you know that's not what life is like. But then those other generations where the kids were taken away, you know, and that African memory was attempted to be erased. That's when it becomes more difficult for people to say. That's why education is so important to us, because when we're reminded, some clicks. And for me, it's a spiritual thing because sometimes I remember some things and I'm like, yo, that when you really resonate with a story, you begin to feel like that was me. Like that was my people right there.
Yes.
That's what I would have did. So that's number three for me. As we get to the present day, it's hard to, like, now I'm only in 1526. I got like 500 years to go, right? So that's kind of tough. That's kind of tough right there. You know, I'm gonna probably throw in, let's say, because I talked about her recently, I'm gonna throw in Queen Nanny of the Maroons, another, you know, rebellious figure. We're talking in the 1700s now. She was enslaved. Some say she was born in Ghana. Some say she was born in Jamaica. But I always say she's the Harriet before Harriet, because what she did was very similar, but she formed the Maroon community. A little more difficult in America to do that. But she was also known as, like, she was, you know, trained in the art of warfare. And again, I think just because of how Western society is, it's often difficult for us to imagine or conceptualize a woman doing something so heroic. But like, that was the norm. And it's not to say that we didn't have like explicit gender roles in some African societies. Every society was, you know, culture was slightly different, but it wasn't viewed as rigid as it is here. Some reports say that she freed like over 1,000 enslaved Black folks. And her method was a little bit different because I think she went around like burning some of these plantations. And even at one point in her life, forced the British to sign a treaty, you know? So that, like, when you hear about that, it's like, oh, it ain't just Harriet, it's this too. So if I'm counting, I think that's 4, right?
Yep.
Wow. See, it's hard to do 5.
But you was only in the 1700s.
I got 300 years to make up for. I'm gonna throw in this is real. This is like when somebody asks you to name your top 5 rappers. Like,
I know.
It depends on my mood, right? So how I'm feeling now, because I probably had to do a whole different one for the whole like 1900s. But I gotta throw in Ida B. Wells because I made her that was my first TikTok for a reason. Ida B. Wells is one of my heroes. She wrote. Yeah. From Mississippi, went to Memphis, was teaching at 16. 2 of her friends were lynched for having a grocery store next to a white man that was successful. This is in the 1890s. 1890s, y'all. I don't think, like, people got to understand what was at risk. And she spoke up. She wasn't like just passing some notes or tweeting a few things. She was writing about it to expose it to the point where she had to flee and come to my hometown, Chicago. And she still didn't shut up, right? She spoke out so much. I mean, it wasn't just like Dr. King. It wasn't just people on the outside that didn't like what she was saying. We have folks within our community that said she needs to be quiet, especially as a Black woman. I don't think that we have like paid her proper respects. In Chicago, we do a little bit. Like, they got a national monument. They've renamed some streets. They got like the home as a historic landmark and stuff. But I think because what she did wasn't in the 1950s, we sometimes overlook her. But to me, there's no King X, Rosa Parks, Ella Baker, Fannie Lou Hamer without her, to Obama, anything you want to talk about in the present day. So that's not my definitive top 5, but how I'm feeling now, those are 5 things we should be looking up right now.
Okay, I guess I gave you some new content. All right.
Yeah, I can't believe I had 400 years to cover. I was on 4 already.
You was 4 and you was only in the 1700s. Listen, this is why I said, let me ask this brother that question. Let me ask him that question. Because I knew you were going to go outside of the normal,
Yeah.
who people chose. But that's a good point, though. I like that you chose Ida B. Wells, because I think, we talk about Ida B. Wells. We know about her, but I think the ways in which you feel like she should be lifted up and celebrated more, it's an interesting concept, because I'm like, well, why don't we? Why don't we talk about Ida B. Wells a lot more? It's I gotta dig into that.
She was very rebellious. She would call, you could tell when somebody's really doing it for people, and nobody's perfect, but like, she called out some folks. She called out people. She one of those people where I wish we at least had like a video or something of her, this week, because I just knew she would give people that look.
Because she was about it.
She was
Ida B. Wells was about it. So I gotta look at why we don't celebrate and lift her up and her rebellious spirit up a little more. And I'm thinking, like, maybe because they couldn't whitewash her, right? Maybe she was too raw. Okay, she was too rebellious. You can't make that a friendly story,
right?
Okay?
Right.
I don't know if you can make that a Hollywood movie,
right?
So,
right. And I don't think at that, and I don't want to say there wasn't a male counterpart, because of course she was existing at the same time as W.E.B. Du Bois and people like that. But I think because how she did a lot of her work, she overshadowed a lot of the men. I don't know if we were we did have Harriet Tubman and stuff like that, but I feel like it's more difficult to pigeonhole her and place her in what was going on. That's why I say, like, if she had more, like, if the media access was different during that time, if we had TVs, if we had movies and things like that, and we were able to kind of see her more. That's the thing that Dr. King and that movement benefited from, and they knew that like TVs are ubiquitous now. Yes. Let's use it to our advantage,
Absolutely. Just like social media is that for us.
Exactly.
Right now, for sure. So I'm going to give you a little bit more time to drop a little bit more history on us. So you don't have to feel like it was just squeezing to these little 400 years. Like, I can't, it's too much. I think another big thing that I see around Black History Month time that's super interesting to me, but also really, really inspiring. And I'm also trying to weave in and give some content to our educators listening, that y'all can go back and talk about some of this stuff in the classroom. But I think one of the major things is inventions. And the reason why I'll be hyped about inventions, because I think sometimes white people act like they created the world, right? Yeah. So you just you wouldn't know and wouldn't understand some of the stuff that we as a people have invented, have contributed to what the world would be like without some of the stuff that we did. So I would love for you to talk about what are some things that you think or that were invented by Black people that we have no idea that we created.
Oh, yeah. I kind of did a series about this, and I'm doing some videos now about it as well. So it's kind of fresh on my mind. Number one, I already got one. Number one is Osborne Dorsey. Black boy. He was 17 when he invented the doorknob in 1878. I know that's striking the chord because I got a video out there that keeps doing numbers. And also, too, like, you got to think about that time. A lot of these inventors, you wouldn't like. There's no pictures, especially 1800s. And oftentimes, which is surprising to me, is that might be the only thing of public record for them, which lets you know that to be an inventor, it wasn't like, I'm going to go to school, I'm going to get this degree, I'm going to be an engineer, work for this company. No, it was like, you are trying to solve everyday problems where you are. We don't even know a lot about this brother, except he was like 8 months old when he got freed. Later in his life, he was a butcher. He did not capitalize off of that. Matter of fact, when he invented it, it wasn't still used widespreadly. And at that point in time, people were using like leather straps and latches and stuff like that, which is like wild to even think about. But we're talking again over, 120, 30 years ago. So I think that's one that we take for granted. It's the smallest thing. I think there's a brother named Alfred Krell who invented the ice cream scoop, like something as small as that, right? Sister named Sarah Boone, who made an improvement on the ironing board so that it would converge. I think in like at the top, so you know how you put your shirt around it.
Yep.
So you know, because if it's just completely square, you can't really iron around the edges like you need to. She did that. There is Alice H. Parker, who invented the heating furnace. Like, we don't have any pictures. We don't have any knowledge about her. Matter of fact, if you Google her, a white woman of the same name will pop up who was born like 10 years after she died, I think, Alice H. Parker. So you got to be real clear. I think it's Alice H. Parker. We talk about Marie Van Britten Brown, who invented the home security system with a video in the 60s in New York. And she did this because her husband used to work overnight. There's a lot of crime going on in the neighborhood. So they say, let's create something that can make you feel safer. She works sometimes as a nurse too, coming home late. So she needed something to be able to see. So we don't have the Ring app without her.
Oh, wow.
I could keep going. I mean, shoot, Shirley Jackson, caller ID. I know we know what that was like before you pick up the phone.
Shout out to Sister Shirley, okay? Shout out to Sister Shirley for bringing peace in people's lives, okay?
Real, like scam, what they say, scam or spam maybe or whatever.
Yes.
Scam. Oh yeah, I ain't picking that up. Matter of fact, if I don't know who it is, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and leave a voicemail.
Yes,
if it's important, you know what I'm saying?
Shirley, I love that though. I love how you also put this as like people just was trying to solve everyday problems.
Yeah,
everyday problems, making it happen. But again, all the stuff you named, would have never knew that these were inventions by Black people.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, Gerald Lawson, the video game cartridge. James West invented, he improved the microphone. I think it was called the Electret microphone, which is a standard now for what you're using, what I'm using, and 90% of all microphones out in the market. Black men, you know, so we everywhere with 14%, right? But
yes,
hey.
But we doing it, right?
We do it big.
Crazy. So that's big. Love that. Listen, pure content lessons out here for educators listening. Okay, this is great stuff for our young people. Great stuff for our young people. So another question, you as I would consider you a young person. Definitely still connected to the culture and the climate. And I think that a lot of times we wonder, where is the balance, right, between today's culture, today's climate, and our history? And like, what responsibility do like people have to act or not to act? Because you're connected to social justice. Like you said, that
right.
You went viral because you were involved in a hate crime, right?
Right. Yeah. Fighting for justice in my situation. Yeah.
So you were able to take that. But a lot of times, some people don't feel like it's their responsibility. And I think a lot of times young people are caught in between on what they are supposed to do. Like, is it my business? Is it not? Should I care about color, racism, rights? Like, all of that.
I don't think we can afford not to, but I also don't think that it's everyone's responsibility in our community to have it at the forefront, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Because I don't want us to think that we only exist to fight this, combat this. There are some people, like, not everybody, again, wants to sit down, read books, study, right? There are some people who build physically, right? There are some people who do other things. I think we all have to have that consciousness to say that this can be used for the benefit of my people, right? But not everybody needs to be out in the streets, right? Some people have to be behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. Some people are just finding out about Bayard Rustin, again, behind the scenes. Like, it takes so much to make a team work. And I think that the reason why so many of our kids and young folks might not want to get engaged more or not get involved in these types of things is because, again, the imagination. And I say we, this country has shaped activist work as being deadly. Like, we look at it like, oh, shoot, Dr. King and Malcolm X and, oh man, Fred Hampton, oh my God, like, but we don't talk about the thousands of other people who have lived long lives, some of whom are still around.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? Bobby C. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yes, you hitting on that. That's
yes. So we in this society, we love to celebrate people when they dead. Like, I mean, we think about like if Tupac was still around, would people uplift his greatness, right? Or would we say he's crazy? Would we say he's this? He's, if Biggie, like same thing. So we can pause people in that point and then talk about the greatness. So I think we have to begin to and I've seen this happen more in our culture and the media, but we got to start giving more flowers out to people when they still here. And this is something I want to say too, is for on my heart, because I think that we really have to begin to analyze as a culture why we are okay with Colin Kaepernick still not having a job. and I'm not saying it because of the sport. I just want us to truly think about, because that's the greatest example we have in a public space of what we could have done, but we literally dropped the ball. And I don't know if we knew what everybody's role was, but I will say that the folks who had the biggest opportunity to make an impact were the ones who played with him, right? So what I mean is, because I know people be like, oh man, they got to feed their family. I get that. That's why you do it together. You know what I'm saying? So Mizzou, their football team, I want to say, and I don't want to, maybe 2017, could be off by a few years. They were dealing with some racist incidents on campus. The students were stepping up. You had a brother who engaged in a hunger strike because the president of the school was not doing enough. Whole bunch of hate crimes happening around campus. A bunch of outrageous stuff was going on. The school didn't do anything until the football team said, okay, if y'all don't do nothing, we ain't playing the next game. We won't play. By that Saturday, the president of the university stepped down because they were going to lose so much money. The Super Bowl just had its highest viewership ever, 120-something million households. That ain't taking into account the bars, the fact that people got parties. Like dang near 90% of everybody probably saw it or saw some of it, whether that was Usher or otherwise. All I'm saying is, In Living Color was able to make enough of a dent into the halftime proceedings they had back then with a live show that they were able to impact the NFL to make a live show the next year and have Michael Jackson perform. Not everybody in the NFL has to protest Kaepernick, but what if 10% did? What if 15% did? Like, I think there were a few brothers like Eric Reed who stood up for him, but I think
it was like two people who stood up for Colin Kaepernick.
Two people, and he was a really good quarterback. He went to the Super Bowl. He was better than half of the league when he was assigned again. So I think we have to look at that, because we have to say, like, wait a second, like, we're most of the league. We generate this money, and there's a brother who stood up for something that impacts 100% of the black players in the league. Even if you ain't as well versed in the studies of it, it impacts you. And he said, yo, he didn't even say nothing. He just was like,
just didn't stand up.
He didn't stand up. He didn't say nothing. He didn't wear a shirt. He didn't do this. They asked him, okay, I'll talk about it. I don't want black people to be killed by police. Oh my God!
He did wear some socks one time.
Well, he did. Later on in the season, he was like, "Man, he said, I'm with it. I don't care. I'm wearing it.
When they brought the heat, did he say, "Oh, y'all want to talk? Let me show y'all. Let me show y'all what it really is. Let me show y'all what I'm really kneeling for. How about that?"
And imagine how many of our brothers were probably fearful of him speaking up about that, because it's one of them things where it's like, we know it's a problem, but it's like, it's the same thing with Cat Williams and Monique. It's like, y'all ain't supposed to say names. Like, we know it's a problem, but y'all speaking a little too much. You're going to mess up my money.
Yes.
Right?
It is.
I'm saying all that to say, not everybody, because I truly believe that you can do what you want during the national anthem and you still might be against racism, all that. But this brother took a very public stance, lost his job as a top quarterback. And I feel like we was cool with that because we got a bag. So if we don't rectify that, he's alive. This brother's going to live a long life. And in 50 years, the NFL is going to invite him back and apologize and give him a plaque and have everybody wear number 7. And we're going to be like, great job, Cap, but you could have did something right now.
Yeah, you could have did something right then. It's just like, again, when we think about the story of, we talk about Martin Luther King, but Martin Luther King was most hated when he was assassinated. They murdered Martin Luther King. Like, and now he has a whole holiday and everybody hold hands.
Everybody
And
love
don't
him.
judge on the content. The
Right.
content. They hated Martin Luther King. They killed him. This country killed him.
And what if they do that? Was it the same year or the following year? They got folks like Jerry Jones taking the knee. And we got brothers taking a knee with
Jerry Jones.
I ain't got over it. You can tell I ain't got over this yet.
I can tell that it's a sore subject for you, but rightfully so. It should be. And again, you bring up great points to, again, like, we need another hour to get on this subject, but you're right. The balance of that and what that is to people, because you will have people saying exactly what you're saying right now. I got to feed my family. I mean, that brother decided to do that on his own. There are different ways we could go about this. Why he got to kneel during the anthem? Why he got to be so public? You have all of that all that rhetoric and conversation that takes place, when at the end of the day, what he did was completely harmless. He didn't bother anybody. He just said, I'm not standing for this racist anthem. Like, I'm going to kneel. That's all he did.
That's it.
He didn't say nothing. He didn't release no statements. He wasn't making social media posts. Fuck the police. Like, he didn't do none of that. He just said, hey, I'm not standing for this.
And the knee was like, that was an agreement he had with a veteran.
Absolutely. So he did what he was supposed to do. Like, I'm not trying to disrespect the flag. I'm not trying to disrespect people who are at war. So what should I do? Veteran said, all right, brother, just kneel. I understand why you don't want to stand, just kneel. So he did what he was supposed to do. I had a conversation with the veteran. They said kneel out of respect. And still. So, I mean, you bring up a really good point about what a good debating conversation about balance and what that should be. And what it should look like, and how people who do have power, opportunity to do something, how they should do it.
And that's why, too, I got to say this, I'm sorry to cut you off, but that's why we, as folks who ain't going to ever play professional sports or be on the Grammys, like, we have to also be educated and committed, too, because oftentimes we'll throw stones and be like, why y'all ain't stepping up? Why y'all ain't doing nothing? When it's like, the brother at your job, the sister at your job had an issue, and you decided not to say something with her or whatever. You saw what happened. So we can't just be like, it's only their responsibility. We have to be educated, because also, too, we never know when we would be in that opportunity, in that situation.
Absolutely. That's such a great point. Like, when I tell you, just opened up a can of worms, this is going to be a whole nother show, and it probably is going to be a whole nother show. Part two, the balance of culture, climate, and history in our community, and where does our responsibility lie in that? Right, Bean, write that down. Next show with Mr. Crim and Shayna. We out here.
Right.
Oh my God. I'm super excited that you came on today. This is such a dope conversation. Like, I can't even believe we out of time right now. Yeah. But before we go, I always give my guests an opportunity to thank a Black teacher before we leave this platform. So I want to give you the spotlight to do that.
Wow. I'm a
and you could thank more than one. It don't only gotta be one.
Yeah, well, I can go on a tangent, so I'm gonna just keep it brief. I normally shout out my college professor, but he's all in my book, and I've shouted him out a lot. This time, I'm gonna take the time I'm gonna shout out Mr. Chin and Mrs. Chin. Mrs. Chin was my library teacher in elementary school at the white school I went to. Just always knew she saw something in me and just the rest of her Black students, and she knew while she was there, she needed to look out for us. Even though I didn't have the words for it then, I felt it, and I feel it now. And her son, Mr. Chin, ended up working there as a PE teacher. And I keep in touch with him to this day. He's always showing me love, always shouting me out, always sending me words of encouragement. And that was, this brother was like 6'6". We used to just be in awe of him. Because this dude, again, we see Jordan, we see Mr. Chin. Like, Mr. Chin, can you dunk? Mr. Chin, can we, we just thought the most amazing, just the kindest dude ever, all for his people, all for the community. So shout out to Mr. and Mrs. Chin. Thank you for everything you've done for me.
I love that. Dope. Mr. Crim, this has been an hour. Listen, all my folks out there, I also want to give you space to name your handles out here. Because if you're not following Mr. Crim and you're listening to me, please go follow, like, share his videos, use them inside your classrooms. Where can people find you?
Yeah, I'm on TikTok and Instagram primarily, mainly Instagram, though, I would say, at Mr. Crim III. So that's at MR Crim, CRIM3. That's not two M's, just one M. Mr. Crim III. You can also find me at my website, ernestcrim.com. That's ER, not EA, ERNESTCRIM. I'm on all these social media streets, LinkedIn too. You can find me on there. Even Twitter, I'll be kind of lurking in the shadows on there too.
Lurking, they stay lurking. Listen, thank you so much for coming to see us today and really, really dropping some rich knowledge and history on us. Happy Black History Month to you. And shout out to Brightbeam, our partners, and the Center for Black Educator Development for giving us the spotlight to host Building the Black Educator Pipeline. Please subscribe, like, share wherever you are. So all my co-conspirators, we'll see you next time. Peace, y'all.